Heinlein, Le Guin, Haldeman, Dick, and Asimov. The question isn't, are these authors represented on my top 150 science fiction reads list? The question is, how frequently are they on there? Hi, I'm Michael Leverts, and you're watching Fit to be Read. Hi, I'm Michael Leverts. This is going to be another preview video for the project that I'm working on to do my top 150 science fiction books. In the previous video, I discussed why I'm doing this list, and I talked about how I'm putting it together. And I also made the distinction that this is my favorite 150 science fiction reads, not necessarily the best written science fiction ranked 1 to 150. It's not the must-read 150 science fiction reads. I might try to tackle that at a later date. But for right now, this is just my favorite 150. I've narrowed this down from about 400 books to my 150 favorite. And I stopped at 150 again because this is sort of when I was coming down and narrowing the list down to towards 150, it was still books that I really enjoyed. If I'd gone past 150, there's still books in there that I liked, but I really felt like books that I really feel like I could say I really liked these books, I really enjoyed them. The list was about 150. So today I'm going to do my final preview before actually finishing the project. The project will probably be done in another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll upload it a week or two later from there. So I'm about 4 or 5 weeks out from when I want to release this, but I don't want it to sit dormant, so I want to do one more final review of where I am in this project and talk a little bit about my process. Since the last video, what I've been working on is just finalizing that list of 150. I've been tweaking it. I've been writing blurbs for each of the 150 books. That's the thing that's probably taken me the most time. I've gone through, and I don't want to do a full review. In some cases, it actually might have been easier to do a full review on each book. What I've had to do is sort of edit down my thoughts and the things that I wanted to say about each of these books, which was very hard to do because some of these books are very complex and very interesting. And as I started writing down the blurbs, I realized I was writing pages of content that I was going to have to edit down. And it was really hard to do that because there's so many things that I loved about these books that I wanted to talk about. So I've narrowed that down. I finished all 150 blurbs. There were a few books that as I saw them, like, wow, I really like that book. And then I couldn't think about what it was about the book that I loved, or I couldn't remember all of the plot points. So I actually had to go back and research some of these books together and sort of refresh my memory. And that took a little bit of time as well. This is a big list and I'm really excited about it. So I don't want to sort of shortchange it and just put generic comments in there. I wanted to kind of get back in touch with what I felt about each of these books and put a little bit about that into each of the blurbs so that it could be well represented in the video. I did play with the order a little bit. In the last video, I talked about how it was really easy to rank from 1 to 150 right away. And that still holds true, but I did tweak it a little bit. There's like 1 or 2 books that I think came off of the top 150 that I realized, you know, maybe they just don't belong on there because I thought of a few other books that I wanted to put on there, so something had to get knocked off. But I also, as I was going down and doing the blurbs, I started from 150 going backwards, and then I got to like, I don't know, number 80, and I was thinking about this book, and I'm like, is this really better than that? And then I moved things around a little bit doing that, and that was sort of a neat process to do that as well. So that's sort of where I am. I've got the 150 list down. The rankings are pretty solid. Maybe 1 or 2 things could move between now and the time that I actually film this video, but I don't expect the order to change too much. I also mentioned that I'm planning on filming this maybe in the next 4 or 5 weeks. I'm still finalizing. Again, I want to go back through all the blurbs now that I've done them all, make sure I'm happy with all of it. But then I also have a few other things that I'm trying to get off my plate before I do that video, and a few things that I want to prepare for. I'm currently doing a reread of Irobot. That was one of the ones that's somewhere on this list, right? I can't say where. And I realized, because it's a compilation of a bunch of short stories, I really wanted to refresh my memory on it because it was one of the ones that I know I love this book. But let me make sure, A, it stands up. B, it's not that long of a book to read, so I can tear through it pretty quickly. And also because of its being short stories, I wanted to familiarize myself again with each of the short stories and sort of just have that experience with that book again and still feel really solidly about where I'm going to put that on the list. So I'm going to want to do a review of Irobot as well. I'm finishing up a reread of Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm going to be reviewing that as well in the next week or two. and I just did a review of Fire Upon the Deep that will be going up or has gone up probably before this video. At the time I'm filming this, I have that in the pipeline, so that should probably come up before this. And checking my notes here, I'll probably reread Caves of Steel since I'm finishing Irobot probably tomorrow. I can probably get that in. I also mentioned in the last video that I'm working on a tag. It's an original tag and I'm really excited about it. I'm just having some fun with it with some of the graphics and the design of it. And I'm looking forward to getting that out there. And that's sort of a big project too. Not as big as this 150 list, but bigger than some of the review stuff I've been doing because it's taken some preparation time. I am trying to use the green screen and learn how to do that. So that's a little bit intimidating, but I'm excited about it and I think it's gonna look, the finished product I think will look pretty cool. I want to finish those reviews of Stranger in a Strange Land, Irobot, Caves of Steel probably, and that original tag. And then I think I can get to filming this list and working on this. Then I got to think about like, what am I going to wear for it? What do I want to do for a thumbnail? I want something that's going to sort of stand out as a thumbnail. Do I want to come up with an interesting intro for this? I think I'd like to do that as well. So it's a lot of more planning. The content is pretty much done and planned for, but then as far as the little bells and whistles, that's something that I'd like to sort of put a little time and creative energy into thinking about. Another thing that I wanted to do in this preview was talk about books that are not going to be on the list. So I don't want to spoil anything and talk about books that are on there, but there are a couple of books that I think are maybe notable that I think people might expect to see, especially in a large list of 150. I know it feels like 150 is a lot and it should be like a catch-all. Any book that you want to see should be on there because it's 150. That's not the case. If we're talking about 400, then maybe, yes. But in 150, it's actually a pretty select list. And I do mean it when I say this 150 are books that I really loved. And 150 is, you know, a book coming in at 150, it's not a knock. That's a great, for me, and on my list, I look at it like, wow, these are some of the really best books that I've read. You know, 100 is the cream of the crop for sure, but 150 are books that I really, really like. And to make this preview video interesting, I wanted to put some interesting things in here. So I'm going to talk about some books that aren't going to be on the list, and I have some pretty good reasons for why they're not on there, okay? So one of the books I thought was going to be on my 150 immediately was Minority Report by Philip K. Dick. I really, really like that story. As I was going through and I looked back at the book and pulled it, I'm like, man, this isn't even a novella. This is so short. I'm just not going to include it. And I think that's the only book that I did that with. And then there's Illuminae. It's a book that I really liked. It's a very unique writing style and it's a different format. It really depends on the day for that one. I had it on the list kind of closer to 150. I took it off. I put it back on and I took it off. I think I'm going to keep it off. I like that and I enjoy that. It's right on the cusp of making the list anyway, and some days on the format I'm higher on it than I am on other days, so I'm keeping that one off. And I made room for some other things that I wanted to have on the list. Two more books that I took off the list or didn't include on the list were A Wrinkle in Time and American Gods. Both of them are really good, and as far as enjoyability, I enjoyed them as much as a lot of the books that are on the top 150. I didn't put them on because I really tried to, because again, getting to 150 was actually kind of, I was at like 160 or 170 and still had stuff I wanted to get on that list. While they were good enough to be on, I just felt that they were a little too much veering into fantasy for me and a little bit too magical for me to consider on the science fiction list. There are some things on the list that sort of veer science fiction fantasy. Those were two that I had feelings of them being a little bit too magical. I think I'm going to be really selective in terms of just the definition of science fiction for this particular list, so I kept those off. Now, the next two I think are going to be controversial, but again, this is my opinion. It's just what I enjoyed. Again, I'm not saying this isn't great science fiction. I'm not saying these are not two of the best 150 science fiction books that have been written. I'm saying that they didn't make my cut for my favorite 150 science fiction books, and that is Dark Matter and Childhood's End. So they're in this category that I'm calling not in my top 150, but definitely in my top 200. So those were ones that were sort of on the cusp. I really enjoyed Childhood's End. I did a review of it. I don't suggest watching that review. It was one of the earlier ones that I did, and I'm probably look like I'm gazing off into the distance, or maybe I was reading off of notes or something. But if you did watch that one, it's very authentic because it's just me sort of spouting off in the camera with not much rehearsal or anything like that, or much experience being in front of the camera. I do talk about how I enjoyed the book. It hasn't aged well for me. I know a lot of people that, because I'm on these groups on Facebook and science fiction reading clubs and things like that, a lot of people have talked about Childhood's End as their favorite science fiction book of all time. So it should at least be in my 150, right? It just didn't make the cut for me. Dark Matter is another one where I'm really surprised at how often I see people say, well, that was my best science fiction read of all time. And I feel like that might be for folks who read a lot of stuff. They read a lot of other type of fiction and fantasy and things like that, maybe not so much science fiction. And I think it's a really accessible book for those who don't read a lot of science fiction or maybe just jumping into it. It was something that I picked up and I enjoy and I breezed through. In the greater context of all the science fiction I read, it wasn't something that like blew me away. Again, it's close. It was on my list at first, like right on 150, and then I bumped it out, and I think if I redid the list now, it would probably be around like 155, 156. So still a really good read, something I really liked, but it's just not going to be on my 150. There are also some things that are not on the list because I read them so long ago and probably felt like maybe they would be on the list, but because I read them too long ago and I'm not going to have a chance to reread them, I'm just not going to play with them and not put them on the list. Then there's stuff that I haven't read. My TBR for 2021 and 2022 that I know about, things that I'm expecting that I'm going to be reading, I'm going to read some of these off. Eon, 11/22/76, Starside Rising, Doomsday Book, among others, Roadside Picnic, Neverness, Rainbow's End, The Cloud of the Concealer, and Shards of the Earth are all on my upcoming TBR. Shards of the Earth is an interesting one because that's one that I could maybe move up on my TBR because I'm really excited for it. I might move that up ahead of my reread of Caves of Steel. So if I do that and I like it, I feel like that's one that I'm going to read, and I'm going to be shocked if it's not in my top 150 just because I know where another Tchaikovsky book is landing on that list, if it's on the list. So that one could end up on there too, but those other ones are on my 2021 or 2022 TBR, so they're not going to be on the list. Maybe when I do an updated list, maybe some of those will be on there. And then like in the last video, I want to end with some stats. And by end, I mean I'm going to throw a lot of stats at you, so we're not ending just yet, but let's get into the stats. I think last time, what did I talk about for statistics? I think I just talked about by certain chunks of time and publication date, what, for the 80s, the 70s, and so on. So what I did this time was I started with Hugo Award winners and Nebula winners and books that won both. So if I broke them down, my list of 150, there's 36 Hugo winners on the list. There's 19 Nebula winners. And then among those, there's 17 that have won both the Nebula and the Hugo Award. So of the 150, 17 of them have won both the Hugo and the Nebula for either novel or novella. And then there's 114 books on the list that didn't win the Hugo or the Nebula. So I think that's a sort of an interesting mix. Take that for what you will. Most represented publication year. I don't know if this is going to mean anything to anybody, but I just thought it was another fun stat to put out. The number one year as far as books I don't even know how do I say it? Books represented on the list. There are 6 books in 1974, published in 1974 that are on this list. So that's the most prolific year represented on the list. And then there's a number of years with 5 titles. So 1985 and 1989, I have 5 titles from each of those years. And then to be even more vague and broad, since 2005, there's 3 years that have 5 titles represented. So there's 3 different years from between 2005 and now where there were 5 books from a particular year that made it onto this list. So take it for what it's worth. My final statistic, the author with the most entries had 7. So there's one author on this list where I have 7 of their novels on the list. There are 4 authors where I have 5 of their novels on the list, and then it goes down from there. But since there's already 4 with 5 and 1 with 7, I think that was enough to sort of mention. So that's where I am on this project. I hope you're excited about this, at least half as much as I am. I'm putting a lot of work into this, and I hope that it's something that people are going to really enjoy and get a lot out of. If you've been following along, you know that I put out this preview video a few weeks ago, and in that one I mentioned I'd been working on it for a few weeks. I still plan on working on this for another 3 or 4 weeks. It's a lot of work. I mean, just doing those blurbs was a lot of work. I'm just about done with the project. It's going to be the fun part of filming this, putting it together and editing it. I got to decide, am I going to, I've got I don't know if I have all of the books back here, but I've got most of them. Do I want to pull them out and show each book as I do it? I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think it's necessary. I think in the post-production and in the editing, I'll probably have the image of the book or something in the background. And I think I'm using the green screen, so that's going to give me some options to do some fun things with that. Thank you for watching today. Please like, please subscribe, please comment below. If you didn't comment on the last video with what your top 3, top 5, top 10 science fiction novels are, please do so today. Please put that in the comment section. Please click the notification bell, because then YouTube will let you know. It'll be a Thursday at 1 o'clock. It'll let you know every Thursday at 1 o'clock when I release new content. But particularly for this video, if you want to see this video of the 150 most enjoyed by me science fiction novels, it's going to let you know when that is, and you'll see it as soon as it's uploaded, and you'll be able to like that and comment on that as well. Thank you for watching today. I'm Michael Everts. This is Fit to be Read.